Hello and welcome to my channel Code with Vinay. In today's video, we'll see how we can check a square matrix for being a doubly Markov matrix. While the program itself is relatively straightforward, but if you look carefully, you will notice that what makes this different from other programs is that the input to the 2D array is actually a comma separated list instead of the usual space separated list. I'm referring to the commas in the input over here and over here. Usually you will notice that here we separate the values, whatever we are trying to enter into the array, either by pressing enters or by pressing spaces or tabs. But here it's clearly seen that there's a comma. In computer examination, it is always a good idea to replicate the input and output as closely as possible to the format given in the problem definition. So we'll enter the array as a comma separated list just like it is given in the question. Let us understand the question first. The question says, write a program in Java to declare a square matrix M of order n. So it is given that the matrix name is M and the order is n. And then there are three conditions which must be satisfied for a matrix to be a doubly Markov matrix. The three conditions are: number one, all elements are greater than or equal to 0. Number two, sum of each row is equal to 1. And number three, sum of each column is equal to 1. It is further given that the range of n will be from 3 to 9, and we have to display an appropriate error message if n is not in the given range or the entered numbers are negative. And the final objective is to check whether the created matrix is a doubly Markov matrix or not. Let us move on to the coding now. So we'll begin with the import. So we'll say import java.util.aspect. This is being done because we have to enter something from the keyboard. Then we'll create a class and we'll call it class doubly Markov. And after that, we'll have a driver method which we'll call main. Inside the main, let's create the scanner object first. So scanner in for input is equal to new scanner system.in. And thereafter, we have to prompt the user to enter something. So we'll say system.out.println. I'll remove the ln because we want the input to be next to the prompt. And the prompt will be just like it is in the question, which is this: input n is equal to. So I'll go over here and I'll say input n is equal to. So this is our prompt. And then we'll declare the variable. Again, the name of the variables, if they are given in the problem definition, should be used. And here the name of the variable given is n. So we'll say is equal to in dot next int. So the n is entered. Now please note, since we have to accept a comma separated list and the only data type which can store the numbers, the comma, the space, minus, and things like that, basically any characters which can be typed from the keyboard, is a string. And so the next input should be the string. So for that, what we'll do is, but before that, let's take care of the range of n. So for that, I'll say that if n is less than 3 or n is more than 9, then we have to display an appropriate error message. And if you look carefully, the appropriate error message is given in the question itself, which is size is out of range. So I'll just copy this entire thing and I'll copy it along with the output message. So I'll copy this from here and we'll paste it within double quotes. Once this is done, we want the program to terminate immediately. So we'll simply say return without anything. Please notice the main method is void So we cannot return any actual value. We just have to say return, and the control will go back to the JVM and the program will finish. Okay. So we have taken care of the input. And now the next thing is we have to create a double dimension array, the name of which is already given in the question, which is M. So we'll say float M, and we'll have two box bracket for the 2 dimension, and then we'll say new int, and we'll give the size, which is n by n. So this, and sorry, there's a mistake. We are taking a float array because the numbers to be entered are fractional. We could have taken a double array also, but we won't be entering values which are having that many decimal places. So it's a better idea to save some memory and use a float instead of a double. So we have an array. Now we have to again prompt the user to enter the actual values, and for that I'll again say system.out.println, and we'll copy the message, which is this. I'll paste it over here, but before that I'll remove the ln, and then within double quotes I'll display the message. Now once the message is displayed, we have to take the input as a string, and for that we'll say in dot next line. This will allow us to enter the entire array as a comma separated list. Once we have entered the line, we'll say dot split, and we'll split it on the basis of a comma and a space. And once that is done, we'll store these values in a string array, which we'll call as values. And once all that is done, we'll terminate the line with a semicolon. So for clarity, I would like to repeat what we are doing on line number 56. We are first entering the string, then we are breaking up the string using the split method into an string array, and the breaking is being done on comma and a space. So if the input is this 0.8 minus 4.0, 0.9 and 3.5, there will be an array by the name of values. The 0th location will store 0.8, the first location will store minus 4.0, the third location will store 0.9, and the fourth location will store 3.5. I have made a detailed video on separation of a string into words using the split method, and you can find the link to that video in the description below. Also, if you want to make the program more robust, that is like, for example, someone can enter a space after a comma, and sometimes the user might forget to enter a space after the comma. So for that, what you can do is you can tell the computer that a comma might be followed by 0 or more spaces. So this will take care of that scenario as well. And as I've already told you, go through the detailed video if you want to go into the details of the split method. Another thing which students usually forget is that if you are entering a string, I'm referring to line number 56, after entering an integer, the number will be going to the variable, but the enter key which is pressed after entering the number will go into the in.next line, which means that computer is not going to wait for you to enter the string. I'll show you what I mean by this. Let me run this program. So if I go over here and run the program, if I say 3 and I press enter, see, immediately the program finished. It did display enter elements in the matrix, but it never waited for me to actually enter the value. So for that, what we can do is we'll just have to eat up that enter key. So I'll say in dot next line, and this will remove the enter key from the input stream. Just for the demonstration purpose, let me run the program once more. So now if I run the program, computer will ask me to enter the number. Let's say I enter 3, and then it will wait for me to enter the value. So for example, if I say 3 comma space comma 9, and then it will be stored into the variable values. Okay, just for the sake of completeness, let us display those values also. So if I say system.out.println arrays.toString, arrays.toString will directly convert the array into a string, so we can see it without actually running a loop. So I'll say arrays.toString, and then I'll give the name of my arrays, which is values. So let me run this program once more, and the input will be the same input which is over here. So I'll copy this entire thing. We'll go over here, we'll run the program once more. I'll say that n is equal to 3, and then I'll copy paste the values, and when I press enter, notice there is an array. You can see there is a box bracket to denote an array, and within the array 1.5, 3, 0.15, etc. has been separated. Now please understand, what we are getting right now is a single dimension array by the name of values, but what we want is a double dimension array. So now we have to transfer these values from the array values into the array M. So our next task is to transfer the values from the array values to the array M. And for that, I'll need one more integer, and I'm calling it C. Initial value is 0. And then I'll take a loop for the rows and the columns. So int row is equal to 0, row is less than n, row plus plus. So this will go from 0 till n, 1 less than n. And then we'll have one for the column also. So for int column is equal to 0, column is less than n, column plus plus. And once that is done, we'll do the transfer. So I'll say m of row column is equal to values. But please note, again, values is the string, the array m is float. So we have to convert this. Convert this means we'll say float dot parse float, and within that we'll say values of C++. So a quick recap. We are taking the values from the string array. We are starting from the value C, which is initially 0. We are converting it into a float and transferring it into the array. And once that is done, we are increasing the value of C by 1 so that we can transfer the next element into the double dimension array. The question says that if the negative numbers are entered, an appropriate message is to be displayed. So this is the time to display that message. So we'll go over here, we'll check that if the number which we have taken out and placed into the array, if it is negative, we'll display a message. So if m of row column is less than 0, then we'll say system.out.println, and within double quotes we'll copy paste the message, and once that is done, we'll return the control to stop the program. Our next task is to display the array with the message formed matrix, something like this. And for that, we'll again need a nested loop, and I'll just copy paste the loop to save some time. So I'll copy paste the loop, we'll go over here, we'll paste it, and then we'll have the print statement inside. But before that, the caption is to be displayed. So system.out.println, and then again I'll copy paste. So we'll go over here, we'll say output formed matrix, copied, and then we'll display it over here, and then we'll actually display the content. For that, system.out.print, not println, will display the value, that is m of row column, and to put it in Proper columns will give a slash t for the tab character, and after each row will display a new line. So this takes care of the printing of the double dimension array. And with this, we have come to the main part of the program where we'll check if the array is a doubly Markov array or not. And for that, I'll make a separate function to check. And let's say we'll say if our function will be if doubly Markov, we'll pass the array to the function. And if that function's return true, we'll display a message. If it returns false, we'll display another message, and then we'll go up and copy the messages. So the messages are, it is a doubly Markov matrix. So I'll copy the message. We'll paste it inside double quotes. I'll again copy paste it, and we'll say it is not a doubly Markov matrix. And once we have displayed the final answer, we'll close the scanner object. Please note, even though if you do not close it, there is no error, but it is always a good idea to close the scanner object so as to avoid any memory leaks. And now it's time to define our function is doubly Markov. So we'll go to the end, we'll say private static boolean, and the name of the method is doubly Markov, and the argument is a double dimension float array. And this method is doubly Markov should return true if the sum of all the rows and columns equals 1, otherwise it should return false. So let's begin. I'll say int n is equal to m dot length. I'm doing this so that we don't have to write m dot length several times. Then we'll have the outer loop for rows as always. So for int row is equal to 0, row is less than n, row plus plus. And then within that loop, we'll say for int column is equal to 0, column is less than n, column plus plus. And then we'll declare and initialize two variables, one for storing the sum of rows and one for storing the sum of columns. So we'll say float sum rows is equal to 0, comma, sorry, sum rows is equal to 0, comma, sum cols is equal to 0. And then we have to actually find the sum of the rows and the columns. So we'll say sum rows plus is equal to m of row col. This will find the sum of row, and then we'll say sum cols plus is equal to m of col row, and this is going to find the sum of each column. And once that is done, we'll go out and we'll check that if any of them is not equal to 1, we'll return false. So if sum rows is not equal to 1 or sum cols is not equal to 1, we'll say return false. If the whole loop completes and we go out of the loop, we'll say return true. I'll save the program, I'll reformat the code, and then it's time to run the program. Now we'll run the program for each of the test cases given in the question. So for the first test case or the first example, n is equal to 3 and the input is this. So I'll copy the input. It is the doubly Markov matrix. Let's see. We'll go over here. We'll run the program. the value of n is 3. I'll paste the matrix, I press enter, and it is saying it is a doubly Markov matrix, which is correct. Let's move on to the next example, which is not a doubly Markov matrix. So I'll again copy it. This time also the value of n is equal to 3. Let's run the program once more. And then 3, input pasted, and again we are getting the correct answer. It is not a doubly Markov matrix. Now let us also check for the error cases. So here n is equal to 2 and the input is this. I'll again copy the input. We'll again run, and this time n is equal to 2 and it is saying size is out of range, invalid entry, which is also correct. Why? Because n is equal to 2, which is outside the range. So it seems that, or it doesn't seems, it is actually the input case is wrong in this case. So what we'll do is we'll just correct this input case. I'll make it 3. I'll copy the previous input. I'll paste it over here, and then we'll make one of the values negative. Let's say the second last value is now negative. So let's run this once more. So I copy the input with the negative entry. We'll run the program again. I'll give n is equal to 3, which is in the range. Copy paste, press enter, and again we are getting the correct output. Negative numbers entered, invalid entry. The last case is size out of range, which we have already checked by mistake. So this takes care of all the 4 cases given in the question paper. So this is how we check whether a double dimension array is a doubly Markov matrix or not. That's all for this video. See you in the next video soon. Till then, happy coding. Your feedback is valuable to me. I want to make sure that my videos are clear and helpful. You can follow me on the internet on any one or all of these channels.